When the amazing Captain Britain is sent to Earth 238, there are no heroes of any kind. What we come to learn is that a guy named Mad Jim Jaspers is the Prime Minister of England, and he has created a cyborg called the Fury that can adapt to anything to destroy all the superpowered beings on this Earth. But we are being delivered this information from inside of a teapot helicopter that is immensely bigger on the inside than it looks on the outside, with the room growing and characters appearing that are deceased or that resembled Alice in Wonderland characters. That's because Mad Jim Jaspers has the ability to warp reality, one of only a handful of characters who can do so. Eventually, when Earth 238's reality is completely destroyed, we're introduced to an Earth 616 reality, Mad Jim Jaspers, who is actually way more powerful than his 238 counterpart. When Captain Britain pays him a visit, Jim uses his powers to make Captain Britain believe he was dreaming and that he has woken up out of a coma. Jim then gets frustrated and wipes this entire reality clean to start fresh. He is eventually destroyed by the Fury cyborg that survived the 238 reality, who teleports Mad Jim to the empty 238 reality where there is no reality for Mad Jim Jaspers to warp, and the Fury cyborg destroys him. I think Marvel kinda realized that they created someone much too powerful and had a literal Deus Ex Machina wipe him out before you could do anything more. To quote a user on Quora, Kite Man has always been kind of a joke. Back when Kite Man appeared in Batman number 133, not even his creators Bill Finger and Dick Sprang took him seriously. Kite Man would just randomly show up in a story, stealing something or flying around or just the usual villain stuff, shouting his catchphrase, "Kite Man, hell yeah," before being effortlessly crushed by Batman or whoever else was around. He was pathetic, and that made him funny. Then along comes the war of jokes and riddles. The story is as much Kite Man's origin story as it is a Batman second year story. Basically, the Joker and the Riddler go to war. Enter Charlie Brown, a divorced loving father and lowly aerodynamics engineer who just so happens to have helped design the Joker's car. Riddler promptly exploited him as a spy before Batman did the same thing, and in the chaos of it all, Brown's son was tragically lost thanks to the Riddler. Riddler ended up poisoning the rope used to maneuver a kite that Brown and his son loved to play with, so in retaliation, Brown builds a costume and becomes a henchman for the Joker, taking on the identity of Kite Man to remind himself why he's even doing this. Now, Kite Man does eventually get some measure of justice, but that's his origin. He's a shattered man in a city that's taken everything from him, and now he's Kite Man, a literal joke. A pathetic joke whose existence is justified by the fact that it honors his son. He's not evil or crazy or even a criminal, he's just incredibly broken, and that is sad. But moving on from that, I feel like people don't realize just how dangerous the Absorbing Man from Marvel Comics can really be. Back in the day, that was certainly true, but with his inclusion in the more recent stories, particularly the Immortal Hulk, people have come to understand just how powerful the Absorbing Man is. His main power is the ability to absorb anything he has touched. There's practically no limit as to what he can absorb and take the attributes of. Glass, silk, water, a whole comet at one point, steel, paper, helium, cosmic energy from a cosmic cube, electricity, gamma energy, and even Thor's hammer Mjolnir. He's grown to the size of a skyscraper and has even absorbed and controlled the mind of the Hulk. Some of this stuff doesn't even make sense, and yet he did it. He's given the Hulk, Thor, the Sentry, and even Odin a run for their money. The main thing that holds him back is he's really just not that bright. That's it. If he ever got an above average intelligence, most of the Marvel superhero community would be absolutely done for, and that's what happened in the alternate universe Earth 997 when he absorbed Ultron's intelligence and could then store different absorption abilities for later use. Cameron Hodge was Warren Worthington III's childhood friend and college roommate, and he was absolutely in love with Warren Worthington. Hodge was a publicist at an advertising firm when Angel contacted him for help starting X Factor. Hodge was the one who suggested that X Factor pose as mutant hunters, which they did thinking it would be a good cover story, but Hodge was well aware that this would increase hostility towards mutants, helped along by X Factor's national advertising campaign. He then captured and experimented on the mutant Richter in an effort to create a massive earthquake that could be blamed on mutants. He attempted to drive Cyclops insane, erasing all evidence of Cyclops' wife's existence and also creating a fake body for him to find. After Angel had his wings damaged damaged in the mutant massacre and needed to get them amputated, Hodge then attempted to wipe out Warren in an explosion, after which he produced a will that left him in charge of Worthington Industries. Warren had been saved by Apocalypse, but when he returned, Hodge then captured, experimented on, and took the life of Candy Southern, Warren's longtime girlfriend, which is when Warren relieved him of his head. But during the events of Inferno, Hodge came back after making a deal with the demon Nastir that he would be given immortality in exchange for 13 children. And his crimes only got worse and worse over time, all with the motivation of him being basically in love with Warren Worthington, and yet no one really talks or knows about him. Hugo Strange is one of Batman's best villains, and the opponent Batman calls, quote, the most dangerous man in the world. Yet, a lot of comic book fans aren't even familiar with him, which is really odd because he's been in some of the greatest Batman stories of all time and is one of Batman's oldest villains. He first appeared in Detective Comics number 36, just 9 issues after Batman's own first appearance, and he was featured in Batman number 1 when the Cape Crusader got his own monthly magazine. Some of the greatest Batman stories that feature Hugo Strange more prominently are Batman and the Monster Men, which featured Hugo Strange as a point of view character, Batman Strange Apparitions, which is a fan favorite run on Detective Comics where Strange discovers Bruce Wayne's identity and usurps it, and Batman Prey, where Strange teams up with Scarecrow and attacks Batman psychologically while working with the Gotham City Police Department's new anti-vigilante task force. He was also pretty prominently featured in the Arkham City game, which is where a lot of fans originally learned of him. 1983's New Mutants number 3 introduced the Demon Bear in the form of a dream or a nightmare, one experienced by the team's own Danny Moonstar. Now eventually it was revealed that the Demon Bear was the one behind the apparent passings of Danny's parents, and that the monster was intent on wiping out and subsequently possessing the hero to use as its own vessel on Earth. Now thankfully, Danny's teammates were able to save her from its attacks, most of all Magic, who seemingly destroyed the beast with her soul stored. In reality though, the heroes had merely returned it to its slumber until the next time it would be woken up by forces beyond their control. In the years since, the incredibly powerful Demon Bear has made a handful of appearances despite never finding a really permanent place in the wider Marvel universe. Instead, the Demon Bear has been relegated to tormenting the Native American heroes whose ancestry it shares an innate connection to. Every other appearance of this demon has proved to be life-changing to those caught in its path, but again, it's just kind of fallen to the wayside. Able to copy the knowledge, skills, and powers of every individual within a certain range of him, the mutant villain and sometimes hero known as Mimic has shown the ability to manifest a bunch of powers at the same time, and since he also absorbs knowledge, he can immediately use those copied powers with the same skill as the original owner. He is a super cool character, and over time he permanently gained the ability to use the powers of all the original X-Men. He had Angel's wings, Beast's super strength and super agility, Cyclops' optic blasts, Iceman's cryokinesis, and Jean Grey's initial limited telekinesis. He had the powers of an entire team, which makes him quite the handful when he was acting as a villain. But the fun thing is, Mimic has danced around from villain to hero, back to villain, even leading superhero teams. He has been featured in a lot of X-Men and mutant related stories, and yet for me, he always seemed like a bit of a side character. I just think he could really cause a huge amount of trouble. Over his time, he has used the powers of Professor X, Wolverine, Cable, Warpath, Sunspot, Nightcrawler, Shadowcat, Colossus, Omega, X-Men, a whole bunch of others, and yet this is probably one of the first times some of you might have heard about him. A young, successful, and secretly entirely evil CEO in DC Comics, Wrath is capable of being both Batman and Bruce Wayne's #1 nemesis and antithesis, and yet almost no one cares or knows about him. Wrath first appeared back in 1984 as basically an anti-Batman, and while that may sound like lazy writing and may make you think he won't be popular, he did it before the major villain Prometheus ever even conceived of the idea. Wrath's parents were 2 burglars who were accidentally taken from this plane of existence by a young police officer who stumbled on them and thought they were robbing their own house. As you can imagine, this is quite the villain backstory to turn a young Wrath completely against law enforcement. He then dedicated his whole existence to going against them. Now Wrath even ended up training a young ward of his own named Elliot Caldwell, who you might have guessed became his version of Robin. Caldwell eventually takes on the role of Wrath himself, filling in his mentor shoes, and he remained as the villain after the New 52 reboot. And yet, Wrath is nowhere to be seen, and you basically never hear of him. The alien cybernetic monster Xemnu is an incredibly intelligent being with a huge amount of strength and power. Introduced in Marvel Comics in 1960's Journey into Mystery, he is one of the first monsters introduced, and he even predates the Fantastic Four. Xemnu is able to cast hypnotic rays that can control the entire human population, use telekinesis, scatter his atoms, and even inhabit host bodies. In other words, Xemnu is incredibly powerful, and yet he is almost completely absent from most of Marvel's stories. Most recently, Xemnu was a foe of the Hulk in the Immortal Hulk series, where he was completely terrifying. He was hired by the Roxxon company to ruin the Hulk's public image by creating disasters and then swooping in to save the day. Xemnu used his hypnotic powers to persuade civilians and even close friends and allies of the Hulk to turn their backs on him. Thankfully, Hulk managed to break free of his control and he actually completely destroyed Xemnu, but I'm hoping that doesn't mean he's gone for good. And finally, when we first ever meet Mazahs, he is described as the most powerful superhero on Earth 3, the home of the sinister JLA, the Crime Syndicate of America. He was for a long time the biggest threat that the Crime Syndicate of America ever faced, and he has taken the lives of a lot of their members using his superpowers. Mazahs was Alexander Luthor and was just a regular guy until at some point in his life he figured out how to take the powers of other superpowered beings. It seems that the first person who lost their powers and their life to Alexander was Will Batson, Earth 3's Billy Batson, which gave Alexander the power of Mazahs, called down dark lightning, transforming him into a more muscular being with a superhuman strength, durability, flight, electrokinesis, and presumably magic. When he first shows up, he has already stolen the powers of a hero called Hawkwing, who we don't know, and he goes on to gain all the Kryptonian-like powers of Bizarro, plus Kryptonite immunity, the Firestorm Matrix powers of Deathstorm's Earth 3's Firestorm, the super speed abilities from Johnny Quick, and more. He took on and nearly defeated the combined villains of the main universe until Lex Luthor defeated him, and that was that. Just gone and yet to return, and I kinda need more, so let's fix that. But with that, my name is Adam Andrews. As always, I will catch you guys on the flippy flop. Stay safe, keep positive, and peace out, you nerds.